Okay, we ready to get started? Okay, so let's do a little test. Who remembers Rabbi Grossman shir last year?
I do, and I remember him too. He's a Montrealer like me.
Well, yeah, Montrealers, Lance, like, yeah, I'm sure you see each other on walking on the street in Côte Saint Luc, okay. So
I remember it was
last year,
fantastic.
I'm sorry.
I remember it, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, it was Parshat Bo, and he talked about the evolution of the Korban Pesach. So this week is Beshalach. So next year we're signing up for Parshat Yitro. But and as Rabbi Grossman probably mentioned last year, he's mentioned at the time, Parshat Beshalach is his favorite week of the year because it's Shabbat Shirah, and he gets to walk over an hour in minus 20-degree weather in Montreal, so he can daven at the Shar Shemaim, and hear the Chazan and the choir. So and we're very honored that he chose Shabbat Shira, his favorite Shabbos of the year, to spend it with us at Torah in Motion. He, of course, is a native of Toronto, but he's been living, I don't know, how many years are you in
8 years.
8 years. He's the president. He's the head of school of Akiva Academy, one of the day schools in Montreal. Always has his tie and jacket on, very formal, but always interesting to listen to. So, Rabbi Grossman, bevakasha.
Thank you so much. It is my favorite Shabbat of the year, and I've chosen not to speak about the Shira itself. In fact, as I'm going to show you, removing the Shira is actually going to add some clarity to what is going on in this week's parasha. I want to focus this week on the idea of Matan Torah b'Mara, the idea that there was a revelation of the Torah, that the Torah was given at Mara. I'm going to share my screen. This is an idea that is found in Chazal, and as we will see, in other ancient sources. And my question today, in addition to just presenting this fascinating idea to you and showing the depths of it, is to really answer the question of why the ancients, including Chazal, were so obsessed with this idea of the Torah being given at Mara. The Torah being given immediately after the Israelites crossed the Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds, as opposed to about a month and a half later at Mount Sinai. We're going to explore why this is such a subject of fascination for Chazal, and we're also going to talk about how it actually emerges quite nicely from the Pshat, and what seems at first to be a bit of a wild idea actually has good grounding in the text itself.
Does it echo the?
All good?
I will try. That's my job. When there's this unwanted noise, it sometimes takes me a few seconds, but I'll try to deal with that. Thank you.
So let's begin by taking a look at the story itself that appears in this week's parasha. And again, I have removed Shirat Hayam to show you how beautifully this flows. If you take out Shirat Hayam, you'll see that the story begins, Vayar Yisrael et hayad hagdola asher asa Hashem b'Mitzrayim, vayireu ha'am et Hashem, vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe avdo. When Israel saw the wondrous power which the Lord had wielded upon the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord, and they had faith in the Lord and in God's servant Moses. So the story begins with this idea of the fear of God, and leads into, if you take out the Shirah, it leads into this story, which we'll read in its entirety, since it is the focus of our class today. But Vayasa Moshe et Yisrael miyam suf vayitzu el midbar Shur. Then Moses caused Israel to set out from the Sea of Reeds. They went into the wilderness of Shur. They traveled 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. Keep this water in mind. We're going to talk about this a little later. They came to Marah, but they could not drink the water of Marah because it was bitter, and that's why it was named Marah, Marah being the Hebrew word for bitter. of water that is not potable. And the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" So he cried out to the Lord, and the Lord taught him a tree. Vayorehu Hashem eitz. A very strange locution, but that is the correct translation. Ignore all other translations that try to paper over the strangeness here. That's what it actually means in the Hebrew. Vayorehu Hashem eitz. The Lord taught him a tree. He threw it into the water, presumably the tree, and the water became sweet. These brackish waters became potable water. Now, this strange word, vayorehu, is, of course, from the same root as Torah, right? Vayorehu, that's exactly the same root as Torah. And embedded in this Torah, in this phrase here, in this pasuk, is this idea somehow that Hashem revealed some Torah, and it's connected somehow to a tree. We're going to also explore that a little later. But for the moment, let's just focus on the fact that the story, after it discusses this idea of the lack of water, it introduces this root of Torah, and specifically the Torah of Hashem. And then it becomes even more detailed. Sham sam lo chok u'mishpat v'sham nisahu. There, God set for them a law and a statute, right? There seems to be a law and a statute, chok u'mishpat, that is revealed. Again, pay attention to that word pairing because it is rare in Tanakh. V'sham nisahu. And there he tested them. Not clear what this test is exactly, but we will see that this word is also going to be significant. So here we have Torah, vayorehu etz, right? The word Torah. We have chok u'mishpat, law and statute, which are also associated with Torah, with the law. ויאמר אם שמות תשמע לכל השם אלוקיך וישר בעיניו תעשה והאזנת למצוותיו ושמרת כל חוקיו כל המחלה אשר שמתי במצרים לא אשים עליך כי אני השם רופאך. God said, if you'll heed the voice of the Lord your God diligently, doing what is upright in God's sight, giving ear to God's commandments, and keeping God's laws. There again, we have commandments and laws. This constellation of vocabulary around the idea of law and Torah seems to imply that there was some sort of revelation here, although it's not clear exactly what was revealed. But some laws were revealed, some Torah was given, and then this very, very odd phrase, I will not bring upon you any of the sickness that I brought upon the Egyptians, for I, the Lord, am your healer. It seems out of nowhere. The commentators, classical and modern, really struggle to figure out what refuah, what healing has to do here, what disease are we talking about? What sickness of the Egyptians? And at the very, very end, please God, we'll get to it. I will give you my own personal chidush as to what I think this is talking about. And then another odd thing, the story immediately goes into another episode. Vayavo Elima, and they came to a place called Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there beside the water. Very, very short story, very enigmatic, but I do want you to pay attention to the 12 springs of water and the 70 palm trees that they encountered when they arrived in this place after they left Marah. So to summarize up until this point, there seem to be some oblique references in this story after they crossed the Sea of Reeds, that the Israelites received some sort of revelation, some sort of Torah, some sort of laws at this place called Marah, after which they traveled to a place called Elim, where they encountered the 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees. That is the story that I'm going to be dealing with this evening in our parasha. And what I want to do now is I want to move to next week's parasha, the famous story of Matan Torah at Sinai, And I want to show you how closely in the pshat of the text the two episodes echo each other. First of all, just because of the way the Parshiot are broken up, it is seldom noticed that the story of Sinai, which is also Chorev, both words are synonymous. Sefer Devarim seems to prefer Chorev. The rest of the Torah seems to prefer Sinai, but there's no doubt they're the same. They're the same place. The whole episode of the revelation of Matan Torah at Har Sinai actually starts with a similar story about the Israelites not having water to drink. That is the story of Moses hitting the rock, whenceforth comes the water. But seldom noticed in this verse, Exodus 17:6, right? Hineni omed lefanecha sham alatz ur bechorev. That whole story of Moses hitting the rock and water coming out of the rock happened at Chorev, happened at Mount Sinai. The story of the revelation of the Torah at Mount Sinai starts exactly the way the Mara story starts, namely with the Israelites complaining that they do not have potable water, God miraculously producing water, right? And both happen in a place where there is a revelation of law. Both stories start in the same fashion. And they continue. And the Lord said to Moses, I will come to you in a thick cloud in order that the people may hear when I speak to you and trust you ever after. This is the lead up to the revelation at Mount Sinai. Vayu nechonim leyom hashlishi. Bayom hashlishi yered Hashem leinei holaam al har Sinai. It also starts after a 3-day wait, just like the story at Mara. So both the revelation at Sinai and the Mara story in our parasha start with this water issue. They both start at a place of revelation, and they both invoke a 3-day period that intervenes. Furthermore, if you continue with the story from next week's parasha, from the parasha, v'emru Moshe deber ata imanu v'nishma v'al yidaber imanu Elohim pen namut. You speak to us. The Israelites said to Moses after God gave the 10 Commandments, we will obey, but let not God speak to us lest we die. The Israelites after the revelation, Mount Sinai, were tremendously shaken by God's voice and begged Moses to be the intercessor, right? And then what happens? V'yomer Moshe el ha'am al tirau ki levavur nasot etchem ba Elohim uvavur tia yirato al pnechem levilti techatau. Moses answered the people, be not afraid, for God has only come in order to test you. Both stories invoke this idea of testing. Both the story of Mara in our week's Parsha and the famous story of Mamad Har Sinai involve the idea of God testing the Jewish people. And just like our story starts with this idea, right? Vayira'u ha'am et Adonai vayaminu b'Adonai v'Moshe avdo, that the people feared God, so too we have uvavur tia yirato al pnechem, in order that the fear of God may ever be with you. So you see, in both stories, the same elements: the water, the testing, the 3 days, the fear of God, the revelation, and again, you have to take away the intervening material. But how does the story of Matan Torah at Sinai end? Right? V'echtob Moshe et kol divrei Hashem. Moses then wrote down all the commands of the Lord. Early in the morning, he set up an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars. Then Moses, Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu, and the 70 elders of Israel ascended. Both stories end with a 12 and a 70, just like our story in Mara ends with the 12 springs of water and the 70 palm trees. The story of Har Sinai ends with 12 pillars and 70 elders. And look at how they both end, right? They both end, Vayechazu et ha'elokim, vayachlu vayishtu. They beheld God and they ate and they drank. Both stories end up with the Israelites drinking. So there is for sure a connection between the Sinai revelation and what happened at Marah, a very close textual parallel, as if the revelation of the Torah happened almost identically twice, once in our parasha and once at the famous revelation at Mount Sinai. And you see the textual parallels. Now, having finished the story of the Ten Commandments, let us now turn to the actual Ten Commandments, and we will find there something quite surprising. If you take a look at the Ten Commandments, at least as they appear in the book of Deuteronomy, you'll notice two interesting anomalies. Of the Ten Commandments, two of the commandments have appended to them the phrase, Kasher tzivcha Hashem Elokecha, as the Lord your God commanded you. Two of the Ten Commandments, right? The law of Shabbat, keep the Sabbath day, Shemor et Yom HaShabbat lekodsho, and the command, Kabed et avicha v'et imecha, honor your father and your mother. Those two commands in the Ten Commandments have appended to them, as the Lord your God commanded you. Here's the English for those of you who prefer. When God reveals the Ten Commandments, after two commandments, he says, by the way, these commandments were already commanded to you. You've already heard these two commandments. Now, given that the Ten Commandments were given for the first time at Mount Sinai, how could the Israelites possibly have been commanded beforehand? When did that happen? What does this mean, as the Lord God commanded you? That Shabbat and honoring your parents were already commanded even before Mount Sinai. The answer to that question is found in Rashi, who takes it from two separate Gemaras, one in Shabbat and one in Sanhedrin, and his answer is instructive. What does this mean? Kasher tzivcha, as the Lord your God commanded you, kodem matan Torah be'mara. What does it mean when it says, keep the Sabbath day, as the Lord God commanded you? Meaning, as he commanded you at Marah, in our parasha. Rashi says specifically this reference in the Ten Commandments to a previously given commandment to keep Shabbat. It happened in Marah in our parasha. And so too, Kasher tzivcha afal kibud avaim nitzavu b'Marah. And so too, right, the commandment to honor your father and your mother, that too was received at Marah. When God says in the Ten Commandments, by the way, you've already heard of Shabbos because I already commanded it to you, and you've already heard of Kibud Avaim because I already commanded you. In both cases, this was the revelation of the Torah at Marah, right? And Rashi references our parasha shenemar sham sam lo chok umishpat. There he appointed for them a law and a statute. What law? What statute? Shabbat and honoring your parents. And indeed, in this week's parasha, Rashi references this idea. Rashi on our parasha, sham sam lo. Right there, he set for them a law and a statute. At Marah, he gave them a few sections of the Torah in order that they might engage in the study thereof, namely, במראה נתן להם מקצת פרשות של תורה שהתעסקו בהן, שבת ופרה אדומה ודינים. The command regarding the Sabbath, the red heifer, and the administration of justice. What? What? Okay, so it's true that in the Ten Commandments with Shabbat, the Torah says this was already given, and Rashi told us that was already given at Marah. But we also heard that this was true of honoring parents. That doesn't appear here. And suddenly Rashi inserts here that the commandment of the red heifer, of burning the red heifer and sprinkling the blood of the red heifer, this was also given at Marah. Absolutely bizarre. I am going to offer you a fantastic solution to this problem a little later in the shiur. But for the moment, what I want you to focus on is what Rashi is doing here. Forget the actual content. What Rashi is doing here is he is trying to argue that it was not two commandments that were given at Marah, as we would have implied from the Ten Commandments, Shabbat and Kibbutz Avayim, but rather there were three. And this number three is very important to Rashi. Rashi wants to up the number of commandments given at Marah to three because Rashi, I believe, is very familiar with the Midrash Seder Olam. We know he is because Rashi refers to it all the time. And if you look at Seder Olam Rabbah, Miyam Suf Nasu Lamara, from the Red Sea they traveled to Marah. As it is written, they came to Marah. And it says, and he made for them a law and a statute, and there he tested them. There were given to the children of Israel 10 commandments. Of them, 7 were already commanded to the children of Noah, the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, the 7 commandments to the children of Noach. And it was written, and the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat. Rashi, following Seder Olam, wants to make sure that the number of commandments given at Marah equals 10, because he wants to support this idea that at Marah, it wasn't just that some random laws were given, specifically there were 10 commandments given at Marah, just like at Mount Sinai. 7 are easy to get to. We know that the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, the 7 Noachide laws, predate the Torah. We already know that, right? That's from way back. In fact, that's derived, according to Seder Olam, from the commandment when God says to humans, of every tree of the garden, that is the Garden of Eden, you may freely eat. So we got 7. Rashi now finds another 3 so that he can get to 10 commandments, and at Marah we can have a revelation that exactly parallels Mount Sinai, 10 commandments given. Pay attention, please, to this verse here. Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, because this is going to become both to us as well. So, to summarize up until this point, we see that in our parasha we have a short story of some sort of revelation that is taking place at Marah, and we see that both the textual evidence and the midrashim and the mefarshim, specifically Rashi, are showing that not only was there a general revelation at Marah in our parasha, but a detailed revelation that parallels the revelation at Mount Sinai, with 10 commandments being given here, just like at Mount Sinai. But maybe it was even more than 10 commandments, and that's implied by the midrash in the Mechilta. If we take a look at the midrash in the Mechilta, so first the Mechilta bolsters this idea of the 10 commandments, and he said to them, "If you will heed the voice of the Lord your God, L'kol Hashem Elokecha." Our parasha talks about the voice of the Lord your God. The Mechilta says this refers to the 10 commandments, which were from mouth to mouth through the 10 voices, that is, the 10 voices at Mount Sinai. The Mechilta makes very explicit that the voice of God at Marah was just like the voice of God at Mount Sinai, and in both places we had 10 commandments, but even more, the Mechilta continues. The expounders of the metaphor said they did not find words of Torah, right? uh, which are compared to water. Mechilta says that when the Israelites got to Marah, and it says that they could not find any water there, right? What it really means is that they could not find any Torah there. Torah, we know, is often compared to water. Just like we can't live without water, we can't live without Torah, Ma'im Chaim, the living waters. The Mechilta brings a verse from Yeshayahu, Hoi kol tzameh l'chu lamayim. All who are thirsty go to the waters. Great proof text, by the way, because the verse in Isaiah is clearly talking about water metaphorically, referring to the words of God. Because they were separated from the words of Torah for 3 days, they rebelled. Wherefore the prophets and the elders instituted that they read the Torah on Shabbat, Monday, and Thursday. This, many people are familiar with this midrash. The idea that the reason why we have Torah reading on Shabbat, on Monday and Thursday is because we cannot go 3 days without Torah, just like the Israelites could not go 3 days without Torah. That is the source of our current custom of reading Torah on Shabbat, Monday, and Thursday. But that's not what I want to focus on in this Mechilta. What I want to focus on is that the Mechilta is implying that not only were the Ten Commandments given at Marah, but in fact, the whole Torah was given at Marah. That's why we have the custom to read the whole Torah on Shabbat, Monday, and Thursday. The Mechilta is implying that not just the Ten Commandments, but all of the Torah was given on Mount Sinai, just like Chazal say that all of the Torah was given on Mount Sinai, just not only the Ten Commandments. We have the same parallel going on in both cases, that at Marah there is this major revelation that takes place. There is an ancient work called The Biblical Antiquities of Pseudo-Philo. This is a work from the mid-first century of the Common Era. It is a very old midrashic work that survives only in Latin. It was originally written in Hebrew, and it was then translated into Greek. The Greek was translated into Latin, scholars believe. We only have the Latin version. The original Hebrew version is gone. We don't know who wrote this, but we do know that this ancient work contains many midrashim, and the earliest attestations of those midrashim. Probably most people here are familiar with the story of Abraham being thrown into the fiery furnace. Yes, famous midrash. That midrash, the earliest attestation of that midrash, is not in the midrashim that we're familiar with, but is actually in this work, The Biblical Antiquities of Pseudo-Philo. That's the first time we find that midrash. It's a very significant work. It's just that most Jews don't study it because it wasn't part of the Mesorah, and we don't have it in Hebrew. But it does contain some wonderful Mesorot, some wonderful traditions. And look at what this work says regarding the revelation. So in this midrash, it talks about what seems to be the revelation at Har Sinai, about Mamad Har Sinai. At that time, the Lord spoke to his people all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall not make for yourself graven gods. We're familiar, that's the first commandment. Blah, blah, blah. I left out the intervening commandments. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, nor that which he has, lest others also covet your land. Pseudo-Philo in this work goes through what seems to be Mamad Har Sinai. And as it continues, it seems to be Mamad Har Sinai. When the Lord ceased speaking, people feared with a great fear. They saw the mountain burning with torches on fire, and they said to Moses, You speak to us, but let not God speak to us lest we die. And then God spoke to him, his justice and judgment, and kept Moses by him 40 days and 40 nights. Okay, we're familiar with that story. That's the story of Mamad Har Sinai. But then look at how this story continues. And there he commanded him many things and showed him the tree of life, whereof he cut and took and put it into Marah, and the waters of Marah was made sweet and followed them in the desert for 40 years. According to this ancient midrash, Mount Sinai and Marah are the same place. The two stories get intermingled together. That's how clear it was to this midrash that Marah paralleled Mount Sinai, that this midrash combines the two together. It also adds two elements. One is not important for us, but I just think it's super, super cool. No, it can come off mute if any of you noticed it. According to this midrash, what did the waters of Marah turn into? Anyone pick this up?
Torah.
Be'er Miriam, Miriam's well, right? The water was made sweet and followed them in the desert for 40 years. According to this midrash, the waters of Marah that were made sweet, right, which also happened at Mount Sinai, were the well of Miriam that followed the Israelites for 40 years. Not relevant to this week's shir, but it's so super cool. I had to share it with you. What is relevant to this week's shiur is that this midrash also identifies what was that bizarre tree that we heard about at Marah. This tree that was taught, what does it mean, the tree that was taught? What was this tree that magically sweetened the waters of Marah? It was none other than Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life from the Garden of Eden. Remember, that very tree of life that we saw associated with the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, with the 7 Noachide laws that we saw in the Mechilta, this tree of life from the Garden of Eden, which somehow dispensed the 7 laws of Noach, shows up again at Marah to sweeten the waters and is part of this revelation. So when God shows Moses this tree and teaches him this tree, right, it is the very tree of life, this magic. For those of you who are not so comfortable with this Latin translation of this ancient midrash and are wondering if this is a kosher at all, should know that this idea reappears again in the Zohar. No less than the Zohar HaKadosh has the same idea, V'yoreu Hashem Eitz HaChaim. And the Lord taught them a tree, namely the tree of life. These are the only 2 references I was able to find, but certainly you're not going to get frommer than the Zohar as an attestation for this idea. And of course, right, what do we refer to the Torah as, right? And we sing it every Shabbat, right? Eitz Chaim Hi. The Torah is a tree of life. And we always sort of take it because it's from Mishlei, right? Metaphorically. But according to these sources, we should not take the tree of life metaphorically as Torah. It is literally a tree that dispenses with Torah. It is literally a tree that gives forth Torah that is part of the revelation, and that should make good sense to us, because if you take a look at the original story of the tree of life in the Garden of Eden, Vayatzmach Hashem Elokim min ha'adama kol etz nechmad lemareh v'tov lemachal ve'etz ha'chaim betoch hagan. And from the ground, the Lord caused to grow every tree that was pleasing to the sight and good for food, with a tree of life in the middle of the garden. And what's in the next pasuk? V'nahar yotzei me'eden. And a river issues from Eden. We see the tree of life, and immediately you have the appearance of water, which again we see over and over again represents Torah, right? And then Vayetzav Hashem Elokim al Adam leimor mikol etz hagan achal tochal. And the Lord commanded the human, saying, of every tree of the garden you are free to eat. The tree of life is associated with the first time that God commands humans. The first time we have this idea of God commanding appears with the tree of life in the Garden of Eden. So it makes sense that the tree that was associated first in the Torah with the commanding of humans is the tree that reappears over and over again in order to dispense with commandments. And that's why it makes its miraculous appearance at Marah and is able to both sweeten the waters and provide the waters of Torah. Now, the idea of some form of revelation before Sinai is not such a wild idea. The idea that God offers commandments before Mount Sinai is not such so crazy. We know, as I gave in my shir last year, there was a lot of revelation that happened in Egypt. HaChodesh Hazeh, the law of Rosh Chodesh, all the laws of Pesach. There's lots of stuff that was revealed beforehand. The argument here is that Marah was not just some random revelation, but as I'm showing you, the argument is in Chazal, was a major revelation parallel to Mount Sinai. This was a big deal, right? It wasn't just a few laws here and there. It was a major revelation. And I want to show you a proof that I've found for this, and that is this phrase, which I pointed out to you early in the shiur, chok umishpat. Sham samlo chok umishpat. I showed you that this appears in our parasha. This combination of words, chok and mishpat, only appear 3 more times in all of Tanakh. Only 3 other times in all of Tanakh does the combination chok umishpat appear, and when it appears, it is always for a major revelation. Look here. In the book of Joshua, you have chok umishpat, and look at the context. Vayichrot Yoshua brit la'am bayom hahu, vayasem lo chok umishpat bishchem. On that day in Shechem, Joshua made a covenant for the people, and he said, chok umishpat, a law and a statute for them. Vayichtov Yeshua et hadvarim ha'ela b'sefer Torat Elohim. Vayikach even gedola v'kimea sham tachat ha'ala asher b'mikdash Hashem. On that day, Joshua recorded all this in the book of God's Torah. Joshua writes down this Torah, and he sets and he takes a stone and he sets it up, also in the presence of a tree.
Ha'ela is Elim.
Yes, very good. Thank you. Oh, you always add something to my shirim. Thank you. Yes, it also connects to Elim. Wonderful, Gershom. So as you see here, this is when Joshua presents the Torah to the people of Israel, Chok u'Mishpat, a major revelation involving the Torah. So too, Ezra HaSofer, when Ezra returns with the exiles from Bavel, on the first day of the first month, the journey up from Babylon was started. Ki Ezra hechin levavo lidrosh et Torat Hashem velasot v'lelamed b'Yisrael chok u'mishpat. When Ezra HaSofer presents the Torah to the people of Israel, right, it is also with the words chok u'mishpat. So Joshua, when Joshua gives the Torah to the people of Israel, Shechem, Torah u'mishpat, and when Ezra does so to chok u'mishpat. This combination of words, chok u'mishpat, are a signal to us, a literary sign of a major revelation. And that's why at Marah, we have the idea of chok u'mishpat to hint to us that Marah was not just a random giving of laws, but a major revelation that took place. And now, my favorite example, which I think is also just super cool. There's this wonderful little story at the end of Sefer Shmuel, First Samuel, that the Jewish people go out to war, and as often happens when you go out to war, there are the people who are the soldiers who go out and do the fighting, and then there are all of the people who stay back in the camp, just like in modern Israel, right? You have combat, and then you have the jobniks, who support the army. So too in every army, and so too in ancient Israel. King David is waging a war, and the soldiers go forward. The soldiers win the war. The soldiers come back to the camp, and they're all the schleppers who are all the jobniks who are back in the camp. And the people come back from the battle, say to the people who stayed in the camp, all of the booty belongs to us. All of the loot that we got when we went out to war, we're the soldiers. We're the ones who went out to war, and the people who stayed behind, who took care of the baggage, who took care of the camp, you don't get anything. And King David says, absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's not fair. Everyone is part of the war effort, whether you're a combat soldier, whether you're a jobnik, and everybody gets an equal share of the booty. Okay, it's a lovely story. You can do all sorts of divrei Torah on this and the importance of how different people can contribute to various war efforts and to other efforts. But the story is super significant. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this story. This is the only time in all of Navi, the only time that there is ever a law given. From the time of Moses' death, from the end of the Torah until the end of the last Navi, never, ever is there a law given. Namely, every law that has to be given was given at Har Sinai. That's a very strong point that the Tanakh makes. Never do we hear of a law given. This is the only law that is ever given after Moses dies, after the Torah is given. And to show its significance, once again, the phrase chok u'mishpat, right? Vayi miyom hahu mala vayisimeha l'chok u'mishpat l'Yisrael ad hayom hazeh. Again, the rule, the share of those who remain with the baggage shall be same as the share of those who go down to battle. They shall share and share alike. So from that day on, King David, set for Israel a law and a statute. This word pair signifies a significant revelation and points to the fact that at Marah, there was a significant revelation that took place, just like these three. I promised you earlier that I would return to this bizarre Rashi that talks about the law of the red heifer being given at Mount Sinai. Many quills have been broken, and much ink has been spilled on where on earth Rashi came up with this idea that the para aduma, that the red heifer, was given at Marah. Just as an example, if any of you have a Rashi Hashalem and you look it up, there's a couple pages trying to figure out where on earth Rashi got this idea that the red heifer was given at Marah. There is a fabulous answer, which I think is probably correct, that was given by Baruch Halevi Epstein. Baruch Halevi Epstein, the Torah T'mima. Most people think that the Torah T'mima was his commentary on the Torah. Not true. The Torah T'mima was his amassing his collection of Chazal's writing on the Torah. It's very famous. However, Baruch Halevi Epstein, the Torah T'mima, also wrote a commentary on the Torah. which is, it used to be very, very hard to get. It was out of print for a long time for such a famous author. It was very hard to get. Even today, I had to actually type it out myself. It's not even available online. It's Safaria. But it's an amazing, amazing commentary. And therein, he offers this fantastic solution. Fantastic solution. Allow me to share it with you. I just get so excited when I see this. So this is the Baruch Levi Epstein. His commentary is called the Baruch Sha'amar. He manages to incorporate his name Baruch into the name of his into the name of his book. Ayin Barashi. Rabbi Epstein says, look at Rashi. Shekatav degam mitzvat para aduma nitna b'mara. Rashi wrote that the commandment of the red heifer was also given at Mara. V'lo nimtza zeh, lo b'Talmud, v'lo b'Chelta, v'lo b'Sharei Braitot. He says, but this is found nowhere in the Talmud or the Mechilta or in any of the Braitot. This doesn't exist anywhere in Chazal. V'karov levadai shnafal ta'ut sofrim. And I'm almost certain that this is a scribal error. The Torah Tamima, Baruch Epstein says, take a look at the Rashi Tevot for Kibud Av and Para Aduma, and you'll see they look almost identical. We know that the mitzvah of Kibud Av Va'em was given at Sinai. That's what the Torah tells, given before Sinai at Mara, right? That Kibud Av was one of the was one of the things that was commanded at Sinai. And Baruch Epstein says there was a printer's error. Some ink must have smudged or something. And instead of Chaf Aleph, Kibud Av, there was written Pei Aleph, and a later printer interpreted the Pei Aleph as Para Aduma, and so through a scribal error, what is quite obvious that the two main commandments that were given at Mara were Kibud Av and Shabbat, transformed into Para Aduma and Shabbat through this scribal error because of some sort of ink smudge that turned a chaf into a pei. Of course, Para Aduma was not given at Mara. That doesn't make any sense as the commandment. Of course, it should have been Kibud Av Va'em. And I think with this brilliant solution, Baruch Halevi Epstein has solved why Para Aduma appeared at Mara, since it doesn't make any real sense. But what I would like to do now is to suggest that even though Para Aduma got added accidentally to Mara, I believe that there was another mitzvah that was given at Mara, another specific mitzvah that was given at Mara, and that is the mitzvah of Brit Milah. I think it would be odd if the revelation at Mara, the idea that the Torah is being given for the first time to the Jewish people, would not include, right, the great mitzvah, the seminal mitzvah that was given to Avram Avinu, the mitzvah of circumcision. And I believe I have found some proofs for my assertion. If you take a look at what we have in our parasha, which we've read now a few times, V'yomer im shamo tishma lekol Hashem Elokecha v'yashav be'inav ta'aseh v'zanta l'mitzvotav v'shamata kol chukav. If you will heed the voice of the Lord your God diligently, doing what is upright in my sight, giving ear to my commandments and obeying all my laws, this that appears in our parasha, the source for this idea of laws being given at Mara. I want you to see how closely this parallels the revelation to Avraham that we find in Bereshit. Look here, if you can see, only I'll shrink it just a little bit so you can see it. Look at how the language almost exactly parallels the language that talks about God revealing laws to Avraham. in Bereshit, Ekev asher shama Avram bekoli, vayishmor mishmarti mitzvotai chukotai v'toratai, inasmuch as Abraham heeded my voice, obeying my charge, my commandments, my laws, my teaching. This revelation of law to Avraham Avinu parallels, as you can see from my highlighting here, almost identically what happens at Marah. And what was God talking about? What revelation, what law was God giving to Abraham? As I said to you before, it must have been the law of circumcision, because that was the great law that was given to Avraham Avinu. And that's what Rashbam points out. Rashbam on that verse says, "Vayishmor mishmarti," when Abraham kept my charge, kugon milah mitzvotai kugon mitzvat shmona yamim, a reference to the circumcision, the command to perform the circumcision when the baby is 8 days old. And so we have a hint here that just like Abraham was given the command of circumcision, so too at Marah, in addition to the other laws we've talked about, the commandment of circumcision may also have been given as well. This also solves another problem, which was this very enigmatic phrase, which I showed you at the beginning. What is this idea of the diseases, the sicknesses of the Egyptians, and this idea that Ani Hashem Rofecha, I the Lord am your healer? Well, of course, what does God need to heal but a circumcision? And there is a reference that the Gemara has here to this idea, the Gemara in Yevamot. Uvamidbar, my time loma. What is the reason that they, the Israelites, did not circumcise themselves in the desert? Ibayit ela mishum chulya the orcha. It was due to the sickness caused by their journey, that the Israelites did not circumcise in the desert because they were afraid of the sicknesses that they saw. Even though Hashem had assured them that they would be healed by him, the Israelites did not circumcise in the desert because they were afraid of sickness. And finally, on this note, I would also like to suggest that it was this strange story we have in Shmot of a circumcision. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this strange story. When Moses returns to Egypt, God tries to kill him. At a night encampment on the way, the Lord encountered him and sought to kill him. So Tzipporah, Moses' wife, took a flint, cut off her son's foreskin, and touched his legs with it, saying, "You are truly a bridegroom of blood to me." And then God let him alone, and she added a bridegroom of blood because of the circumcision. Tzipporah, Moses' wife, performs an emergency circumcision on the way to Egypt. And where did this emergency circumcision take place? It took place somewhere between where Moses was in Midian and Egypt, and I believe it took place in no other place than Marah. It actually fits in perfectly geographically that this emergency circumcision that we find reference to in the book of Shmot actually took place at Marah, and Marah is a place that is associated with circumcision. And here you have a reference as well in that circumcision scene to Vayiref, the same as Refuah, that it was there that God provided healing from circumcision, and that Marah was a place where not only these other mitzvot were given, but the law of circumcision itself. And this was a place where the circumcision that Tzipporah performed took place. So what is all of this about? Why is there this this passion that we have in Chazal, which I started with, of showing this revelation at Marah, of proving that Marah was this special place where the Torah was revealed, and why, if Chazal and the ancients were so intent on this, why isn't it more explicit in the Torah itself? Why are all these things hidden in these different places? Why did it take me almost an hour to tease all of this stuff out? The answer, I believe, is that this goes back to a very, very ancient debate, which lies at the heart. I always like to go back, Rabbi Kelman, to Torah in Motion, which is how significant is Mount Sinai? There is an ancient debate as to whether Sinai is the be all and the end all of revelation, or if revelation can take place in other places and in other times. And this is an ancient debate. I will not take sides on it. There are many Jewish sources that try to show that Har Sinai was completely sui generis. It was completely different, it was completely significant, and there is nothing like Har Sinai, and nothing can compare to Har Sinai. And then there are other people on the other side who say, no, there are other references throughout Tanakh to other revelations, even major revelations. And in fact, we could even argue that before Mount Sinai, there was a complete revelation of the Torah to the Jewish people. And Sinai is significant, yes. But there were other revelations to the Jewish people. This has tremendous theological implications, whether Sinai is alone or whether there are other revelations. I will not delve into this here. There are others who have delved into this. But I do believe that the idea of Matan Torah B'Sinai, the idea of revelation of the Torah at Sinai, and the revelation of the Torah at Marah are intimately connected. It is not by accident that they're one parsha after the other, and they point us to the significance of Mount Sinai and the role that it plays in our lives, and whether other places played a similar role as well. Thank you.
I think that you proved that Moshe Rabbeinu was not just Chatan Damim, but Chatan Torah.
Oh, beautiful. And always a poetic twist.
I would add to that Aaron, Vayidom Aaron, with the death of his sons, makes him also a Chatan Damim.
Ooh, that's fantastic. Fantastic. I think I had some questions in the chat. I just have to find them. Okay, I'm just going to go through. Any connection between the water of Marah being bitter and the Yam Suf being used as a weapon? I have to think about that. That's very clever. That's very clever. Yeah, there might be something to this, and even also connecting to Moses hitting the rock. There seems to be some connection between these waters and violence. I could argue that Torah is both a sweet thing and is also a weapon too. Chazal, we know, often referred to themselves as warriors. So yeah, that ties in very nicely. A dress rehearsal for Sinai, I love it. And in fact, maybe it's possible that when it says there he tested them, right? Vishem Nasahu, right? Jack Wasserman, right? Beautiful, right? Maybe the test, right? This was the test for Sinai to see if they were ready for Sinai or not. And since the Torah is likened to water, the Drashad Mara could be that the commandments, without God being involved, is bitter indeed. Very nice. Why don't we have that phrase in Yitro? I'm not sure which phrase, Wendy, read back. I'm not sure which phrase you're talking about.
Kasher Tziva.
Kasher Tzivah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. So that's bizarre, isn't it? So there are two versions of the Ten Commandments, one in Shmot, one in Dvarim. Chazal are very insistent that the two are identical, right? That's where we get Shamor v'Zachor b'dibur echad, right? This idea that both versions of the Ten Commandments were spoken simultaneously. But you notice throughout the Ten Commandments, there's some things that appear in Deuteronomy, there's some things that appear in Shmot. I don't know why certain things appear in one place and not in the other. This is not the only example, except to say that Chazal believe there's no difference. The two were said b'dibur echad, were said simultaneously. Some are highlighted in the Shmot reporting, some are highlighted in the Dvarim reporting, but they're both the same. Certainly, Rashi treats it as if they're exactly the same. It doesn't appear in Yitro, but Rashi would have us believe that they were. It was said at Yitro exactly the same way. Uh, does the Zohar have additional midrashim quoting Sudafai? I don't know. I'd be surprised if it didn't, only because, as I said, many things that are in Pseudo-Philo appear in many midrashic works. I don't think, though, this is a reliance. In other words, I don't think that uh, depending on your theology, whether the Zohar was ancient or not, I don't think the Zohar relies on Pseudo-Philo or Pseudo-Philo relies on the Zohar. There was clearly an ancient Masorah of the Eitz Admara being the Eitz Chaim, and it just appears in different sources. It probably appeared in lots of other sources that are lost to us as well. When we find the same thing, we call independent attestation. We find the same thing that appears in different sources. Our assumption is that these were midrashim that were wandering around. Remember, most of these things were oral, and they found their way into these different works. That's sort of how scholars treat it. There's a phrase that said, "Tzedakah mishpat" also connotes an epiphany, such as the revelation of Hashem to Avraham. Yes, that's a whole other topic. Tzedakah umishpat. In fact, if you want, I have a little postscript to this lecture. I can actually tie that in if you're interested in staying for another minute. Without the paraduma, the calculation and paralleling the threads he brought falls through. No, it doesn't, because you just substitute para aduma for kibud avaim, and you end up with three. So the calculation still works. Thank you. I also thought these ideas were super cool. So maybe I'll end with a little postscript if you're interested. I said this idea.
Rabbi,
Yeah, please.
if I'm not mistaken, Brit Milah was a chiyuv before Korban Pesach Mitzrayim.
Yes, absolutely. But absolutely, and let me bring this because this is highly significant and ties in. So this Brit Milah idea, Brit Milah being before Sinai, is of tremendous importance, not only here, but to two great thinkers. First of all, the last source here, I wasn't sure if I would get to it, but it's so much fun, might as well I'll show you. Rambam was one of the great thinkers for whom the significance of Sinai as a sui generis experience was paramount. Rambam said Sinai was all. There is no revelation outside of Sinai. Rambam, Maimonides, wants to argue that nothing that happened outside of Sinai was of the significance of Sinai, and he does so specifically on Brit Milah. In his commentary on the Mishnah, Rambam says this: ושים לבך על העיקר הגדול הנכלל במשנה הזאת. Pay attention to the great principle that is contained in this Mishnah, Mishnah Chulin, namely that what we are forbidden or required to do is only because of the commandments imparted by God to Moses on Mount Sinai, not because of what was said to any prophet beforehand. For example, we do not practice circumcision because Abraham circumcised himself and his family, but because God commanded us through Moses. Psh. Rambam says, of course, we've encountered circumcision before Mount Sinai. You mentioned it. We encountered it. The Israelites had to do it for Pesach. Abraham had to do it. God told him to circumcise. But Rambam says, do not think that the reason that we perform circumcision was because we needed to prepare for the Korban Pesach, or because Abraham circumcised himself and his family. No, 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 Rambam says. If that were true, then we, the Jewish people, would be like every other folkloric people in the world. Every nation in the world has customs that they do because their ancestors did them. Every nation will tell you, we observe these rules because our grandparents observed these rules. But we perform these rituals because our ancestors performed these rituals. You can ask the indigenous people of Canada. You could ask Hindus. You could ask Muslims. Anyone you ask is going to say, we have customs that we do. These are our folkloric ways. And Rambam says, do not mistake what we do. When we Jews keep commandments, we do it for one reason only, because God commanded us to do it at Mount Sinai. Not before, not after. The commandments are special. They are significant. They are the word of the Lord spoken directly to Moses and the Jewish people. Do not confuse that with all of the other customs that appear. There are lots of minhagim, but the Jewish people are special. The Torah is special. We only keep circumcision because at Mount Sinai God said keep circumcision, not because it was done at any time before. Any time before was just part of the folk ways of the Jewish people, or certain circumstances we had to do it for Korban Pesach. And lastly, and I'll end on this because it's also fantastic. The other people who were very concerned that Mount Sinai was sui generis are the Christians. In the book of Romans, the New Testament wants to argue that Mount Sinai, right, was completely sui generis, that there were no commandments, nothing of significance before Mount Sinai, and that Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the whole Jewish people, everything that they observed in Genesis, right? They observed all of those. They observed all those rules. Only after Mount Sinai, because Christians want to argue that everything that happened before Mount Sinai is the way that the world should be. The world should have been without Mount Sinai. The world should have been without law. And Abraham, tzedakah mishpat, when Abraham was doing things that were righteous, he was doing that before there was any type of revelation. And the New Testament in the book of Romans says that the reason that we can dispense with all of the laws of Mount Sinai is because before Mount Sinai, right, we were doing perfectly nicely. Abraham was righteous before God ever told him anything about circumcision. Our ancestors were living wonderful, good, moral lives before Mount Sinai. And therefore, the Christians say it's very easy to dispose with Jewish law, right? Because the Jewish people did very, very nicely before Mount Sinai. So ironically, it's very important to both Maimonides and the Christians for very different reasons to say that Sinai was sui generis, and then we have all of these other sources which try and say no. God gives, God commands. There were plenty of other places where God revealed things to the Jewish people. Chaim Fruchter. Yes.
At the end of
I can't hear you.
two Psukim, the end of Perek Mem, Mem Dalet, it's written just before the end, mentioned few halachot. We're talking about maybe this mitzvah, maybe mitzvah Dorot, and then it's given the ferush, the mitzvah milah. If you're not circumcised, you cannot eat. So explain me that. Why is it that this is specifically talking about
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. So as I said, there are two arguments, right? Yes. So one of the arguments is, of course, right? These are specific mitzvot. There are
And,
lots of
and it's
mitzvot.
not beginning of Parashat Bo. It's not a
Yeah, I
Chodesh
understand.
Lachem.
I
It's the
understand.
end.
Yes, I understand. These are the two arguments. Yes, and you can take one side or the other, right? There's one argument that says obviously there were lots of mitzvot that were given before Har Sinai, right? But then you have other people who want to argue that none of these things that were given before Sinai were significant. Christians want to say they were not significant, and Rambam wants to say that they were not significant. So it depends which side of the argument you want to take. Your point is very well taken. It just depends which side of the argument you are on. And with that, I will end.
Thank you. By the way, David, I just asking you, does the Rambam also include, Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noach? Or they also repeated Har Sinai? I presume the answer would be yes, because
Absolutely,
they're
absolutely.
included, of course, in in Taryag Mitzvah, the Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noach.
Right, right.
Right.
And that's the difference between when Jews observe them and when non-Jews observe them, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. By the way, you're very quickly, what the Torah meme, of course, he does that a lot. He's very into
oh,
printing errors. Zmani, Migdal, Magdil, like Rav Soloveitchik gave a whole shir against one of the Torah Tmimas, like printing errors. Like the Torah Tmima says that on Rosh Hashanah we say Mekadesh Baruch Melech HaKol Haaretz Mekadesh Yisrael, right? We have a whole bracha, and then Yom Kippur we say Mochel Avoteinu Lavanot, and on Rosh Hashanah, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, we say the same Mekadesh Yisrael Vazmanim. Like, why don't we say Chag HaMatzot, Chag HaShavua, Chag HaSukkot? So the Torah Tmima, whoever's talking, I don't know who that is.
Okay, thank you.
That the Torah Tmima says that they use the same machzor, the same siddur for Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. Everybody has their own machzor, Rosh and Yom Kippur. So the printer put in Hazmanim, and you were supposed to fill in Chag HaMatzot, Chag HaShavuot, Chag HaSukkot. So Rav Soloveitchik gave a whole shir why the Torah Tmima was wrong. That he had to do with the Kedushat Hayom of the Yamim Tovim is all the same. It's the same Kedusha where it's Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is different. I don't remember the whole shir, but it's very fascinating. And of course, the Magdil Migdal, he's into printing errors all the time,
yeah.
the Torah Tmima. But
And one
It's interesting that you didn't mention that Rambam says don't stand up for the Aseret HaDibrot.
Yes, that's yeah, that's a big idea that he has as well. But I don't know that it would contradict this. I have to think about that.
okay.
Rabbi Kelman, and last Pesach was I think when's the next time that Pesach falls Motzei
20 years.
in 20 years, right? So
Yeah.
also the Torah Tmim is Haggadah, right? Mina Zvachim and Mina Psachim.
Right. Yes, that
Right?
one. Yeah.
It also has that one as a printing error.
Yeah,
Anyway,
listen, Torah Tmima was a real character. He
yeah.
was very he was interesting. Very very interesting.
One of your great speakers, Mark Shapiro, has many things to say about the Torah Mima and his plagiary.
Right. Yeah, he plagiarized. That's well known. I mean, I don't well known. It's no. Yeah. But okay. But he was a brilliant thing. I mean, have you ever? I haven't read too much of it, but his Makor Baruch. It's sitting there back, the 4 volumes,
Yeah,
2,000 pages of his memoirs and diary.
yeah, yeah,
That's of course became my Uncle the Netziv that got banned.
yeah,
But like,
yeah, yeah.
that's
Yeah, the great.
very
But
interesting.
but this one about the Paran Aduma, this one, I think he's correct.
Yeah,
I
I'm not
can't.
saying it's not correct. I'm just
Yeah,
saying it's
it's a shtick of his.
yeah. The other question, when you say there were no mitzvah by the Nevi'im, are you only saying Nevi'im Rishon? Because in the Nevi'im Achrim there are mitzvot. What do you mean? The whole notion of kavod on Shabbos, the Rambam makes very clear. That's a pasuk in Yeshayahu. There are many mitzvot, divrei Kabbalah, that come from,
But
like you were saying.
there's no actual place in Tanakh. There's no actual place in Tanakh where a new law is given after Sinai, other than this one place.
I don't think that's true. What about Yeshayahu? What about the whole notion of lo yehilucha b'Shabbos kilucha b'chol, that the Gemara im tashimi Shabbat rak lachasot chavetzecha b'dever devar v'karata the Shabbat oneg. You know,
Look, there's a ton of stuff that's learned out. I mean, that's what the Gemara does. But in
right?
terms of on the pshat level, the only other place, Heschel has something on this in his Torah Min Hashemayim, right? The only other place is Megillat Esther, right? That's the only other place, and that's
So then I don't understand the medrash on Megillat Ruth that says Ruth. Why is it written? There are no mitzvah. There's nothing lagid lacha kamilat. The reward for gomle chasadim. If it's true about everything that there's no mitzvah, so why does the medrash make a big deal on Megillat Ruth that there are no mitzvot?
yeah, I can't speak for the midrash. I can only speak for the pshat
Okay.
of
You know
Tanakh.
I'm talking about the midrash.
Yeah, I know exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
But
So
but in terms of pshat of the Tanakh is very clear, uh, and again, Megillat Esther is like the exception that proves the rule, right? This is the only time that there is a new law, an actual new law that is introduced,
that's very interesting.
namely that everything that had to be said said at Har Sinai.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, very nice and creative and original as always. We look forward to learning with you again. And by the way, we're just to let people know, we are talking about doing a series on music, sort of a follow up on Yosef Lendel's whole thing on this. We'll talk about that. Rabbi, we mentioned in the beginning, Shabbos Shira is his favorite Shabbos of the year. He goes to hear to Shar Shemaim to with the fancy chassid and choir in Montreal. And even though he has to walk in 20 below for what is it, about an hour and 20 minutes from Côte St. Luc?
Yeah. But it's worth it.
I understand. And it's a 4 hour davening, right?
Yes, it's 4 hours. Yeah, it's 4 hours. Yes, and people would stay for another hour. No one's in the rush.
I should come one year, but
You're welcome. You can stay with
I
me.
heard what's his name. I told you last year in Israel in Yeshua and I knew
Nissim Stahl.
Yeah, it was also 4 hour davening. I loved it, but my son told me he's not going to shul next week. He got 2-1. You know, he got doesn't have to go. You know, so we know Chazano today is not so popular, but if those who like it love it. Those otherwise, I can. Anyways, so there you go. I schlepped him. What can he do? He had to put up with me. But anyways, all right. Everybody's welcome tomorrow morning, 9:25.
Thank you very much. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, of course. Oh, and one other announcement, of course, next week, in addition to all the regular shiur, Monday, Nechama Goldman Berish is starting her series on the changing roles of women. You can see I just sent out the email. Very interesting. She just wrote a book on modesty, very interesting. Yotzet Halakha, living in Israel now for many years, teaches at Matan. So she'll be starting a 4-part series Monday. It's going to be at 2:15 after Tzvi Grummet here. So from 1 to 2, that's the time that works. So it's going to have a little bit unusual time for this. We've done that once before. So that'll be 2:15 Eastern time on Monday. Monday afternoon, 9:15 for those in Israel, which is early for David Eisen because it's now 4 in the morning. So we want to wish him good morning, good night. But I see he's here. So anyways, okay, everybody. Laila Tov, Shabbat Shalom. We look forward to working with you soon.
Toda rabba, it was wonderful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
Thank
very
you.
much indeed.
Thank you. Always great to see
Oh,
you.
she may teach a parties also, but I'm pretty sure she also teaches them about time. But okay, it's call them Marbe. All right, everybody. Good night. Thanks. We'll see you soon. All the best.